In this lesson, I'm going to tell you about some of the people who inspired me. When I first started with creative coding, it wasn't just one person who made me want to do it. There was a community of people doing great work with Flash, which later became Adobe Flash. But one name that stands out from that period is Yugo Nakamura. He's a Japanese designer who used to have this website called ugop.com, which unfortunately is no longer live. And it had these coding experiments, very minimal and very interesting. Not a lot of them, just a handful, but they were very influential to a lot of people at the time. He runs a design studio in Japan and is still doing amazing work. Skipping ahead a few years, when the web started migrating from Flash to HTML5, there were two websites which inspired me to start doing creative coding using Canvas. One was sketch.js by Justin Windle, which was a minimal framework for sketching, inspired by processing. It had this gallery with some small experiments which were quite fun to play with. The other was Playpit by Eiji Muroichi, who was experimenting with 3D, but who also followed a minimal style. The website was just a collection of random ideas. They didn't even have names, only numbers. I liked the idea of creating a space to host random experiments. There's no need to wait for a project to start coding an idea. It could just be published as a quick experiment. Outside of the web, I was also very impressed by the work of some digital artists. One of them was Memo Akten, who not only has some very interesting ideas, but who also keeps a very high level of execution. His work is very well rounded, very well presented. Sometimes showing a bit of the process behind the creation of the artwork. I'm a big fan of a project from 2012 called Forms. There's this video where we can see footage of athletes in motion and how that was used as input for the abstract art that they were creating. Another digital artist I really like is Ryoji Ikeda. He has a signature style and he's very consistent with his aesthetics. His work is at the same time minimal and complex. He's showing us that we can create something beautiful with code without having to rely on heavy engines or realistic lighting techniques. And more recently, in the era of Instagram, there's a lot of good people doing great work out there. One who I have to highlight is Matt Delorier, who seems to have an infinite pool of ideas for sketching with code. He's constantly publishing new material, and he's consistent with the look of his work. As we'll see later in the course, he's also the author of a popular tool for creative coding using Canvas. And finally, one artist who is not actually on Instagram but who's very active on Twitter is Anders Hoff, who is also known as Inconvergent. Again, minimal and beautiful, but not necessarily simple. He's creating systems and exploring behaviors with mathematics and geometry to create his art. I hope you found the work of these artists inspiring, because now it's our turn. It's time for us to start coding.